Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or, as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. As always, it's good to be with you this morning. Had a couple of weeks of a break there, but it's always great to be back with you. So, welcome to one and all. We embrace, as always, all that you bring with you this morning, your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, and all that helps make you who you are. Welcome to those who hear me say this each Sunday, as well as those who might be hearing it for the first time this morning. We're glad to know that you're with us. So welcome to one and all. I want to welcome everyone who's in the room with us this morning, helping with our service. As always, Todd Milne is working our audio-visual booth and got us started with his piece of his own music. Todd, glad to have you. And Darrell Vanderlinden is here, running our slideshow. Darrell, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Gordon Diddens is our lay leader this morning. Thank you so much. And Michelina Tyree on the piano here. Always wonderful to have and to hear you. And what would our service be without Deb Jackman, our music leader? Thank you, Deb. I don't have any major announcements this morning outside of a reminder of the social hour following the service. For those who want to participate in that, you can find the link in the church email that went out to you earlier. So we can't put those links on the website because, unfortunately, there's folks out there who like to invade and bomb and those sort of things, those sort of meetings. So you have to access it through the link that's officially sent to you through the church email. So look for it under the UUCS email that went out to you earlier in the week. So with that said, let's take a few moments now to greet one another virtually, either through your phone, through a text, through a phone call, an email, whatever it might be. We'll give you a few minutes to do that. And as always, say hi to someone you've been missing. Okay, and as always, I do hope that you'll do your best to stay in touch with each other throughout the week as well. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel on COVID-19, but it's still going to take us a while. So we're all working to be patient and continue to support one another the best we can during the wait. Let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
For my opening reflections today, I'm going to share two readings. The first is from Anne Frank. I can feel the suffering of millions. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think it will all come right, and that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. And the second reading is from Representative John Lewis. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we called the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself.
Thank you, Gordon. Very beautiful sentiments to start our service with this morning. And we are now going to kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our hearts and minds this morning. And I want to begin with a candle in remembrance of Matthew Gervin, George and Lila Gervin's son, who was killed in an accident in Mongolia 20 years ago this week while working with UNICEF in a humanitarian effort to serve the needs of children there. We're keeping George and Lila and the entire Gervin family in our thoughts at this time. Also, a candle of congratulations to Wayne Sabick and Heather Kaselke, our former operations manager, who were married 2 weeks ago. Wayne was also recently diagnosed with cancer and is dealing with that, so we are continuing to keep both of them and their entire family in our thoughts at this time. Let's take a moment of silence, as always, on behalf of others you might be thinking of, and if you'd like, wherever you are, with whomever you are, you're welcome to name them aloud. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. We do have a special collection this month that will be continuing throughout January, and it is on behalf of homelessness and those organizations in our community working to help with that. So organizations that provide shelter and meals and other services to the homeless, like Hope House and Crosswalk and Shalom Ministries and Stephen Elementary School Meals. In addition to your financial donations, there is also going to be a container outside of our front doors during business hours where you can donate things, winter clothing, winter gear like coats and hats and gloves and boots and sleeping bags and any gently used gifts you might be willing to contribute would be welcome. So if you would like to contribute by donating to this very worthy and important endeavor in our community, particularly at this time in our history as well as this time of year, you can send your checks as always here to the church, or you can do so online by going to the donations link, and just be sure to indicate on either that it is for the January special collection. And again, I thank you for your warm hearts and kind generosity in advance. And now, time for our story for all ages. And let us see who has come to help me out today. Well, looky here, one of my favorite people in the world, Winnie the Pooh. It is always great to see you. It's always good to see you, too. Isn't Spokane a little bit of a ways from the 100-acre wood? I suppose it's according to how you look at it. Well, that is true. I guess the 100-acre wood is an imaginary place, so it's only as far away as your imagination. Which is good for a deer with short legs. That's true. Well, what is it that brings you here today? I've got a letter that needs reading. A letter? Well, did you ask Christopher Robin? Christopher Robin is still busy ringing his quarters. Did you say ringing his quarters? Yes. He said he can't come to the 100-acre wood right now because he's quarter ringing. Quarter ringing? I think you might mean that he's quarantining, which means that he's still staying home during the pandemic. I'm afraid I don't know the difference. Well, that's okay, because you know what, Pooh? I'm happy to read your letter for you. I was hoping you'd say that. Yes, well, let's see. Is this it here? Yes. Well, let's have a look. It says that it is from Eeyore. I haven't seen Eeyore lately. It says, Dear Pooh. That's me. Yes, that's you. I'm writing to tell you I won't be seeing you for a while, so don't bother looking for me. You don't sound like Eeyore. Well, I'm sorry. Let me see what I can do. I saw in the news that we are living in dark times, which doesn't surprise me. Better? Better. Much better. Okay. It so happens that I can't see so well in the dark, which is why I won't be seeing you. And since bears can't see in the dark either, there's no sense looking for me, so don't bother. I'll see you when the sun comes up, if it ever does, which I'm guessing it won't. Eeyore. It doesn't seem so dark outside to me. Well, it's just a figure of speech, Pooh. Dark times doesn't really mean that it's dark outside. Figure of speech always confuses me, but it doesn't sound good. Well, there's a lot going on in the world right now that's kind of troubling. That's what I thought. Like what? Well, we're still quarter ringing, and lots of people are angry and sometimes do things that are kind of scary. Are they scared of the dark? Well, they're kind of afraid of the dark, yes, but they don't have to be. They don't? No, because being afraid of the dark is kind of like what you said about the 100-acre wood. Yes, and I meant it too, but I'm not sure what I meant. Well, when I said that it's far away, you said it's according to how you look at it. Yes, that's what I meant. I'm sure. So we don't really have to be afraid of the dark, and keep staying to ourselves like Eeyore, or we can choose to look at our troubles as opportunities to grow stronger and to become better by working through them. You're starting to sound like my friend Benjamin. Benjamin? Ah, you must mean Benjamin Hoff, who wrote the Tao of Pooh. Is he your friend too? Well, I've never met him, but I read his book, and if he were here, I'm guessing he might quote an old Chinese proverb. What's that? It's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. Then that's what I'll do. You will? Yes, I'll go home, light a candle, and go visit Eeyore, no matter how dark it is. Well, I think you'll find that things aren't quite as grim as Eeyore makes them sound. Goodbye, Todd. Thanks for reading my letter. Well, you're very welcome, and please say hello to Eeyore.
As we move into this time of meditation, please get into a comfortable position. Put your feet on the floor. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. And then think about these words of this prayer, Teach My Heart Healing Words, by Samuel Trumbore. Teach my heart healing words. Show me the words that help rather than harm. Instruct me in the verbs that bring energy, the nouns pointing to the real, the adjectives describing your subtleties. Reveal to me how words can be offered in a way that connects rather than separates, that develops trust and eschews suspicion, and that opens the heart and relaxes the mind. Amen.
For our reading today, I'm going to ask Gordon to join me in a responsive reading. This is in honor of the MLK holiday that is happening tomorrow, but also I think because it's particularly significant for what our nation is going through right now and needs to remember. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted.
Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that.
We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation.
The foundation of such a method is love.
Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war.
One day we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal.
We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means.
We shall hew out of the mountains of despair a stone of hope.
With all that has transpired over the last few days in January, I realized that I grew up in a nation of violence. Now, on a personal level, that wasn't my reality. I grew up in North Idaho. The community was small. Things were peaceful enough there. I was 12 in 1960 when I learned about JFK in school, and he was our president. Roughly 3.5 years later, I was sitting in a high school class, I was a sophomore, when the PA announced that he'd been shot. I remember how hushed the room was and how we waited for word. I was a sophomore. Only a few years later, in 1968, I was a sophomore again. I was in college, and the Vietnam War was raging. I knew boys in my class that were over in that mess, and some of them died. Martin Luther King was shot in April of that year. I was actually shocked to realize that in my whole growing up into young adulthood, that was the background of my country at that time. I had never looked at it that way. But there it is. And here it still is. But it helps to focus on those people that have tried to promote and live the ideals that we have in this church. It helps to know that there are people working toward justice, working to change situations that are still an abomination. And so I will sing an old song that was written in those 60s that I grew up in. To help remind us that there are people that are pushing for what this country was founded under and has failed to realize so far. Has anybody here seen my old friend Abraham? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but I hear the good die young. I just turned around and he was gone. Has anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? Well, he freed a lot of people, but they say the good die young. I just looked around and he was gone. Didn't you love the things they stood for? Didn't they try to find some good for you and me? And we'll be free. Yes, we'll be free someday. Oh, has anybody seen my old friend Martin? Can you tell me where he's gone? Well, he freed a lot of people, but you know, the good they die young. I just turned around and he was gone.
Thank you so much, Deb. Not 2 weeks ago, demonstrators stormed our nation's capital in an attempt to prevent the congressional confirmation of Joe Biden's presidency. We've seen video of the event and know that it was undeniably violent and deadly. It has since been called an insurrection, domestic terrorism, white nationalism, and a well-planned, albeit failed, coup. I will leave the incident's labeling, motivations, and origins to the historians to determine. What I can say with confidence is some among a gathering of about 5,000 angry demonstrators used violence to illegally enter the nation's Capitol building in an attempt to disrupt Biden's confirmation. The demonstration and potential violence had been made well known on social media days in advance, yet the Capitol Police and other law enforcement agencies were woefully unprepared for the obvious possibility. When they did respond, we witnessed them treating these particular demonstrators with less force than law enforcement has tended to treat other demonstrators in recent months. Although some may disagree, I consider these 4 points to be objectively true, despite whatever spin has since been put on them to meet the agendas of pundits on different sides of the issue. Yet even without the spin, they are reason for serious concern. That our capital was so easily seized, especially on any day, but especially on a day when law enforcement officials had no excuse but to be fully prepared for such a possibility, is deeply troubling. We're fortunate the trespassers seemed aimless and ill-prepared upon accessing the building, with no organized agenda other than taking selfies and causing mayhem. Had a small number of well-organized and prepared militants seized the opportunity to take hostages or worse, we might still be dealing with an occupation. And I'm guessing the embarrassing ease with which this occurred has not escaped the auspices of our nation's enemies, foreign and domestic. It is also deeply troubling to see another example of two justice systems in our nation. When liberal organizers use social media to coordinate demonstrations in response to the killings of unarmed black men and women by police officers, law enforcement shows up in droves, ready to respond with tear gas, rubber bullets, or worse. But when it comes to angry conservatives, whether they are protesting a legal and democratic election or angry because they've been asked to pay for what they owe for grazing on public lands, or participate in armed standoffs while occupying federal property, right-wing ideologues are handled with kid gloves, while liberal protesters are too often met with itchy trigger fingers, and non-whites in their own cars and neighborhoods get killed for carrying cell phones. And we are disturbed because so many people were willing to take an absolutely unfounded conspiracy theory. Let me repeat that. An absolutely unfounded conspiracy theory seriously enough to engage in a violent and deadly attack against our government and our democracy. To make matters worse, the absurd claim that the election was stolen originated from the highest office in the land, while Republican leaders did nothing for many weeks to affirm Biden's legitimate win or to counter the lie they knew was fostering unnecessary resentment and hostility. This much, I think, articulates the nuances of this particular incident the best that I can. Now I want to focus on a bird's eye view of the matter, a view I'm more comfortable with talking about because I've been talking about it for many years. Seeing the bigger picture is the only way to clearly see the path we must take if we're going to finally move forward, if we are going to heal our nation, as we often hear it put these days. Otherwise, we will remain stuck in patterns of gridlock, conflict, and emotionalism. It is not enough for us to continue dealing with the increasingly violent divisions in our country by putting out spot fires that occasionally erupt. We must address what is fueling all of these fires and commit to doing whatever is necessary to transform our society in the long run. In the long run. The seeds necessary to create a civil, rational, and fairer society can and must be planted now by us. But they will not bear fruit for a generation or more. Just as the causes of today's unrest began decades ago. We must repair our society in order to benefit our children and our grandchildren, not for ourselves. We must endure the difficulties of this moment in history, for this is our fate. And we must do so with integrity and courage and fortitude and with a greater purpose than ourselves in this moment in mind. It can only be in pursuing our purpose, not in the circumstances themselves, because fixing this mess is going to take more time than many of us have. Like Dr. King, whose life and purpose we remember this very week, many of us may not live long enough to see the promised land, but the road there is the path our souls are tasked to walk upon. In September of 2011, only 2 months after becoming your minister, I gave a sermon entitled, Being You in an Age of Autism. As a student of classical psychology, I use autism in its original sense. It's the general tendency to avoid empirical reality in favor of our own unconscious desires and emotions. In my sermon, I cited a definition given by developmental psychologist Jean Piaget. The sole functions of autistic thought, he says, the sole functions of autistic thought is to give immediate and unlimited satisfaction to desires and interests by deforming reality so as to adapt it to the ego. This definition succinctly explains the greatest threat to our society today, as well as the underlying cause of the crisis at the Capitol just 2 weeks ago. When we treat reality as something that we can simply shape to suit our own desires and interests, we can avoid facing the facts by fabricating alternate facts and ignore reality in favor of our alternate reality. In short, autistic thinking, being unable to connect with that which is outside of ourselves, makes us delusional. Although it is rare for me to make categorical statements, all or none, I say with confidence that all of the approximately 5,000 demonstrators in D.C. on January 6 are delusional. This is so because they were all there based upon a belief that about the election that is entirely without evidence. In fact, the evidence which they could not entertain proves the contrary. It should give us some comfort to remember the number of protesters present, comparatively few of whom entered the Capitol building, were a small crowd compared to most major demonstrations that happened there. An estimated 250,000 people showed up in D.C. to hear Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech on August 28, 1963. On that same date, just last year, after the killing of George Floyd by a police officer, tens of thousands demonstrators showed up on the National Mall. So the estimated 5,000 is a relatively small number and represents only 0.01% of the more than 74 million who voted for Trump in November. This autistic tendency is in all of us as we struggle to cope with the difficulties and uncertainties of life. The instinct to retreat from discomfort is as natural as it is breathing air. Yet some develop the fortitude to better accept life's challenges, hardships, and suffering in order to fully embrace the world on its own terms. Others cope unhealthily by dissociating from reality in varying degrees, from simple avoidance to mental illness. In his book, The Sane Society, Erich Fromm points out that many psychiatrists and psychologists refuse to entertain the idea that a society as a whole may be lacking in sanity. But Fromm agrees with Freud, who had hoped somebody would eventually venture upon this research into the pathology of civilized communities, and who compared the evolution of civilization to the development of the individual, saying, many systems of civilization, or epochs of it, possibly even the whole of humanity, have been neurotic. Can we diagnose our country, our world, as neurotic? What happened at the Capitol is a symptom of the collective insanity that has become widespread in our society. A madness of crowds increasingly demonstrated by members on both the right and the left of the ideological spectrum. This is why I say we have to look at the big picture and not address specific incidents situationally, as if they were not part of a larger and more insidious problem. That it is collective, furthermore, makes the madness of crowds feel perfectly sane to those within it, which is why they try to force it upon others and punish those who reject their delusions. Although such has persisted throughout human history, I will only address what I consider to be the three causes that have made today's society especially and increasingly delusional, that have, if you will, assisted in this tendency. And they are, in brief, Western universities, the deregulation of the news industry, and the advent of social media. Beginning in the 1980s, after losing political power to the Republican Party for the first time in 70 years, liberals retreated into academia, during which we saw the percentages of liberal professors go from twice as many as conservatives to 8 times as many. And instead of continuing to teach students how to think critically and to explore new and challenging ideas through the liberal arts, they began teaching them their own political social agendas. As Professor Mark Lilla writes, you may have thought, faced with the dogma of radical economic individualism that Reaganism normalized, liberals would have used their positions in our education institutions to teach young people that they share a destiny with all their fellow citizens and have duties toward them. Instead, they trained students to be spelunkers of their own personal identities and left them incurious about the world outside their own heads. In recent years, we've seen this result in rising intolerance for diverse voices on our college campuses, including the disinvitation of guest speakers, the displatforming and firing of professors, and a climate of fear that prevents many students from honestly expressing themselves, all of which have at times been enforced with violence. I recently learned of a college student right here in Spokane who, upon resisting this mindset, was criticized by his professor, who retaliated by lowering his grades. Once he began playing the game, he was praised for recognizing his original sin as a white straight male and rewarded with a sharp increase in his grade. It reminds me of what Professor Alan Kors and Attorney Charles Silverglate addressed in their book, The Shadow University. The ultimate force of the Shadow University is its ability to punish students and increasingly faculty behind closed doors, far from public and even campus scrutiny. If professors give biased lectures, grade students down for ideological nonconformity, and favor those who agree with them, these activities become broadly known. The Shadow University, however, hands students a moral agenda upon arrival, subjects them to mandatory political re-education, sends them to sensitivity training, submerges their individuality in official group identity, intrudes upon private conscience, treats them with scandalous inequality, and when it chooses, suspends or expels them. The Shadow University was published 23 years ago, in 1998. I can hardly imagine the impact upon the millions of college students who have since graduated, nor the impact that they are now having on society, some of whom are now leading progressive organizations, including the Unitarian Universalist Association. The Shadow University, subtitled The Betrayal of Liberty on America's Campuses by Kors and Silverglate, along with Fire's Guide to Free Speech on Campus by Greg Lukianoff, David French, and Harvey Silvergate, The Coddling of the American Mind, How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, The Closing of the American Mind, How Higher Education Has Failed Democracy and Impoverished the Souls of Today's Students by Alan Bloom, The Tyranny of Virtue, Identity, the Academy, and the Hunt for Political Heresies by Robert Boyers, and The Assault on American Excellence by Anthony Croman are just a few of the titles on my bookshelves discussing this troubling matter, trying to wake our nation up to what's going on. Moving on, the deregulation of the news industry also began during the Reagan administration, when his office got rid of the Federal Communication Commission's time-honored fairness doctrine, making it possible for the emergence of Rush Limbaugh and Fox News, and eventually other very extremely biased media outlets. This, coupled with allowing corporations to begin gobbling up as many news and media outlets in one market as they wish, led to the rapid consumption of our nation's thousands of TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, and magazines by what are now just 5 corporations controlling the flow of information in our country under the thumb of figures like Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes. Since the 1990s, corporate-owned media has become propagandistic, presenting the news as an effort to belittle and discredit one's ideological adversaries. This became true of both conservative and progressive news organizations, which were the first to use communications technology to fashion echo chambers in which consumers of news hear what they prefer to hear or what some prefer them to hear instead of what they need to hear, instead of the unbiased truth. When social media came into its own only about 15 years ago, if you can believe it, it was like putting these echo chambers on steroids. Today, combined with artificial intelligence, the information our smart devices constantly present us with, designed to keep our attention nonstop in order to catch their bread and butter ads, is personally tailored to each one of us based on our own habits. In his book, Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe, technology investor Roger McNamee, once a mentor of Mark Zuckerberg, says, "This is a problem that is endemic in a world where the business model is about tracking human beings, claiming eminent domain on their personal data, using it for behavioral prediction, and then using the tools of machine learning and AI to steer people towards outcomes that make those predictions more valuable." Last week, McNamee published an opinion article for Wired magazine saying that social media needs to take responsibility for its role in the Capitol riot. Referring to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, he says, in their relentless pursuit of engagement and profits, these platforms created algorithms that amplify hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. This harmful content is particularly engaging and serves as the lubricant for businesses as profitable as they are influential. These algorithms are not designed to provide us with the truth or even with variety, but to engage our most primal emotions, fear and anger. They are not there to inform us, but to motivate us, which is why so many now embrace conspiracy theories and other delusions. Welcome to the world of precision advertising, aided by powerful technologies designed to manipulate our minds and our emotions. So these are the three areas we must contend with: biased universities, biased media, and biased social media. To begin, I believe the time has come to radically disrupt higher education. Replacing universities with precision education offered by industries and employers who partner with professionals and expert instructors, resulting not in degrees, but in professional certification for workers. At the same time, we should expand public education to include 2 additional years of schooling focusing on the liberal arts in order to fashion open-minded, well-rounded, thinking citizens. As for the so-called news industry, we must restore the fairness doctrine, or some equivalent, requiring the media to be truly fair in their presentations, and we must break up the media giants who have created an industry that has, by definition, become too big to succeed. It is not possible to get the truth when the flow of information is controlled by 5 corporations that have other interests. They are too big to succeed in journalism. Finally, social media corporations must be legally treated like other dispensers of information, holding them legally accountable for the factual accuracy of the information they present. As McNamee says, policymakers must take action. The harms of internet platforms are no longer contained or abstract. They are destabilizing our society and our government. Now, these changes are not difficult. And there are many good signs that they are on their way. Amidst all the chaos in recent weeks, it's easy to have missed all the good things happening. Firstly, regardless of who won, and I would be saying this, I'm sure, if the shoe were on the other foot, regardless of who won, and regardless of unfounded conspiracy theories to the contrary, American democracy worked in the recent election with historic numbers of people turning out to vote. That Georgia, of all states, became a deciding factor in shifting the balance of power in both the White House and the Senate proves the hard work of grassroots can still make a difference in democracy. It is also true, as I stated before, that the number of demonstrators in D.C. a few days ago was minuscule compared to the major demonstrations. And they represent to other major demonstrations there, and they represented less than 1% of Trump voters. There are more than 174 million Trump voters that did not show up for that protest. We've also witnessed something that we haven't seen in 4 years. The Republicans do have a line they will not cross. It turns out to be at their front door, but it is a line nonetheless, which has resulted in the bipartisan impeachment of Trump for the crime of inciting insurrection. The social media industry has also discovered a new line by suspending all of Trump's accounts, not to suppress his free speech, but because he yelled fire in a crowded theater where there wasn't one. That's against their rules, and it should be enforced. "2021 is not a magic number. We still face many of the problems we faced a few weeks ago in 2020 and in the years before. But we need not despair, because there is much reason to hope, and because we have what it takes to meet the challenges of this moment. Those enduring principles that have illuminated human societies and individuals throughout history: reason, freedom, tolerance, courage, commitment, and compassion. We may not be able to make everything better right now, but with these principles, we can be our best right now, which is the only choice anyone has ever had, and is the only choice necessary to make our lives worth living. Thank you.
Well, all those people I sang about before the sermon are gone, and we are the ones left. So I suggest we get to work, as Todd has given us the push to do. So please sing out from wherever you are. We're going to sing one more step. It's familiar, I think, to many of you. We should have, Darrell will have the words on the screen behind me, and you can even rise where you are if you want to. Okay. One more step, we will take one more step till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word, we will say one more word till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word. One more prayer, we will say one more prayer till every prayer is shared by everyone. We'll say one more prayer. One more song, we will sing one more song till every song is sung by everyone. We'll sing one more song.
As we move into this time of benediction, I will share with you the words that were written about 20 years ago by Gregory Jones. Sorry, there we go. For the benediction today, I'm going to share with you words that were written 20 years ago by Gregory Jones. It was an interesting time and a time that I think relates to us as well today. And it's called Benediction for September 11th. On this hallowed day, we remember. We remember those who are no longer present with us here, but who remain forever present in our hearts and who live on in our memories. We embrace those whose sorrow is unmeasurable. We have no cure for sorrow, only the comforting love of those who are closest to us. We honor those in uniform who continue courageously to run toward danger on our behalf. May we be worthy of their courage and sacrifice. And we ask our civic leaders to always guide us in ways that promote peace over war, tolerance over intolerance, reason over blind passion, and love over hate. May all here find blessing in their lives, hope in their days, and comfort in their nights. Let us now go in peace. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.
Shalom.